So welcome to the first session today. This is the last day, so I can see we have a thinning in the audience. But the session today is on the emerging trends in the domain name system. So we have 4 presenters, use of emojis, blockchain, IDN in Africa, and digital object architecture. So the remote presenter, we're still working out the logistics. And while we do that, maybe I can ask Patrick to start the session. Patrick. So we have Patrick, Alain, Yaovi, and Samad Hussain. Patrick.
Yep. Sure. Thank you very much. So Patrick Jones with ICANN's Global Stakeholder Engagement Team. I guess for this discussion, I'm wearing the hat as an invited participant in ICANN's Security and Stability Advisory Committee. This is the committee within ICANN that provides advice to our board and to the community about security and stability topics related to the DNS. One of the topics that the SAC has provided advice in the last few months is on emojis. So I have 2 young kids, ages 12 and 8, and they love to use emojis in texting. These are pictographs that typically are in cartoon, colorful form. They're used inline in text, and they're popular on phones and chat in applications and in email. SAC provided its what we call SAC document number 95 was all about the issues around emojis and domain names, and this was really the first time that as an advisory body SAC had considered emojis. They do fall within the area of IDNs, so it's a good topic that we'll have Sarmad also covering as part of this panel, because emojis are in the class of character sets that are within Unicode. Right now, emojis are disallowed in the, we call the IDNA standard. Most CCTLDs, in fact almost all except for 2, follow the current IDNA protocol, IDNA 2008. Some of the issues around IDNs are that, and emojis in general, is that if IDNs are to be used as stable and secure identifiers, then sticking to the original design goals of IDNA is really needed. Emojis can be visually similar and difficult to distinguish when they're displayed in small fonts and in different applications. Some of the challenges can be that different devices will render emojis differently. It's very possible that a emoji that displays in an Android device will show up differently in an email application or in an iPhone device or in an older device that may not recognize the same fonts and the same symbols that a newer device may recognize. So this presents a high risk of user confusion. It makes it hard for users to remember the exact type of emoji, because emojis can be composed of different code points. There are now, let's see, in Unicode 8.0 it introduced skin tone modifier code points, so you can now have different skin tones that appear for smiley face emojis and other emoji types, and this can lead to different interpretations depending on how the emojis render in the device that you have. So ESAC looked at this, and they came up with 5 different findings and 4 recommendations for the board, and actually 2 recommendations overall. Because the risks of emojis can't be mitigated without significant changes to Unicode or IDNA, that ESAC recommended to the board that it reject any top-level domain label that includes emoji. The second recommendation was that because the risks can't be mitigated without changes to Unicode or IDNA, that ESAC strongly discouraged the registration of any domain name that includes emoji in its labels. And it also advised registrants that domain names with emoji may not function consistently or may not be universally acceptable and display as expected. So this generated quite a bit of interest, particularly from some parts of the community and some of one of the 2 operators that is not following IDNA 2008. I think ESAC provided some talking points about, and I think we filmed a video at the last ICANN meeting in Johannesburg. So maybe some of you saw that video. We're trying to do more awareness raising of the work that ESAC does on different topics, and this is one that generated a lot of interest because emojis have become so popular in texting and email and other applications. So maybe I'll pause there and turn it over back to Paulos.
Thank you, Patrick. Very interesting topic. I think we'll move on to Alain. Alain, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Paulos. I will focus on blockchain and DNS. Okay, so I think many people know blockchain around Bitcoin and Ethereum, but blockchain is more general technologies which can be used for many things, including DNS. And this is what we should be looking at, and I will put some talking point, and we can share our view, opinion, and have discussion on it. So blockchain, basically what is blockchain is a distributed, secure, trustless database. Okay, so based on point-to-point, peer-to-peer network. So the participants in the blockchain communicate through peer-to-peer. So as we talk about blockchain, so basically it's a chain of blocks. So, and the data you put in a block are some series of transactions. It's a series of transactions, and the transaction has owners, okay, source and destination, the owner, the previous owner, the news owners, and everything based on the public key cryptography. So I will identify myself using my private key, then I set the recipient through his public key. So then the recipient will now use the asset or the token I put there by using his private key. Then, so the transaction get broadcast to the blockchain network and store on the nodes, and then time to time the nodes collect the transactions and put them in a block. And the interesting, or one of the important feature is that the new block has a hash of the old block. The hash, I think I don't know people work. I think people know what the hash is. A fingerprint. I take a text or anything, then I take it through one of the hashing algorithm. SHA-1, MD5, and these things. Then I get the fingerprint. So I get the new block contain the hash of the previous block, and This is how it works. And inside a block, you have a series of transactions. Okay, and then the transactions are put together in a block, okay, by a node. And so as I said, in the transaction must have a previous owner, and then the previous owner must identify himself with the public key, put his own signature, then the data. The data could be Bitcoin, it could be a DNS name and resource record, it could be a token or whatever it is, and then the recipient public key. But for this blockchain system to work, there is a key component, which is the consensus algorithm. Okay, because this distributed node need to agree on what is the common view, because in the blockchain there may be different views with different views. So they have to agree on a view of the database, because as I said, many folk exist. We will see soon some example, and also who has the right to add block. Who has the right to add a block? So the consensus algorithm also dictates who has the right to add the block. And generally, we have two approaches of handling, giving a right to people to add the block. So one way is proof of work, the proof of work, so that the base of your computing power, your hash rate computing power, give you more chance to add a block to the chain. Or the other approach is a proof of stake. So those who has more stake in a fork in the blockchain has more chance to write a block to the chain. So, and this help to make sure that those who, for example, in a proof of stake, so make sure that people who has more stake in behave honestly and add the blocks. Or in the other way is that using the proof of work is people who has enough computing capacity have more chance of adding blocks, so such that no single entity control the whole block or can disrupt the block, etc., etc. But each of the approach has its own limit. For example, if you are doing a proof of work, so if I'm able to buy huge computing capacity, then I may disrupt or control the whole thing, etc. The same thing if we're using the proof of stake. So those who have more stake, okay, can detect. So sometimes we may need to adjust the consensus algorithm to make sure that nobody reach a certain level, etc. So must be adjusted. So proof of work or proof of stake to have chance to add blocks to the chain. So then blockchain has some interesting features. It's decentralized, so it's decentralized, peer-to-peer, no one really control system. It's temper resistant. So if anyone trying to change a transaction or a block inside, because signature plus the hashes, it can be detected. Censorship resistant, because no one really controls the system, say, take this name or take this out. So if I put the transaction there for Kevin, for example, only Kevin, okay, can use it, or because you have the private key, etc., etc. So there is no central authority who can play with it, etc. So no certificate authority need to build a trust. So if I know if I have your public key, then the relationship public key, private key detect. So we don't need a CA to attach your identity, associate keys to this, etc., etc. Non-repudiation is also provided. And privacy. So privacy here is that I can generate a public key for each transaction. So make it random and keep changing, etc., etc. So I can do that, etc. So slow update, because when you put the transaction in there, it takes some time. Okay, then the transaction gets in a block and get added. So it takes time. And the incentive, there must be some incentive for people who add your transaction inside the block, etc. So in some system, the incentive could be coins, money. So, okay. And money will be, anytime you add a block, you get some money. And if you add a transaction, okay, transaction can also offer transaction fees. So if you want your transaction to be included, if you increase your transaction fee a little bit more, you have more chance to be added for your transaction to get in, etc., etc., etc. So and then after the transaction has been added, then it has to be broadcast, so it takes some time, okay, for this thing to go. Then the large storage. Large storage is that the blockchain size keep increasing, etc., etc. So someone we could see it as features, or we could see it as a weaknesses, because okay. So if and the issue here is if a new node joins the system, he has to download the full block before he can participate. So it may take some time, and if you have a slow network, it can be problematic, etc., etc. So blockchain and DNS. So I don't know if you hear about Namecoin. Namecoin use a fork on the Bitcoin system, so it's based on Bitcoin system, but it's different fork. And then Namecoin made some changes to Bitcoin blockchain, where the data they put blockchain is limited to 80 bytes. The data is limited to 80 bytes. The Namecoin, okay, extended the data part to 512 bytes. So they can put coins, they can put a zone, a domain name plus resource record. Okay. So then they offer domain name. They offer domain name, then the domain name is under what they also call TLD, .bit TLDs. .bit TLD is not part of our normal DNS system, but they call it TLD. Then Namecoin support all our existing DNS resource code, including and then putting the public key, putting the hash public key as we explained yesterday in support. Then you own the name, you register the name, you get the name, okay, and then you own the name for maximum 250 days, 250 days. Then you have to renew the name, okay. So we see that, but then all the DNS data there in the Namecoin is stored in the blockchain, based on the Bitcoin in the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you put all your DNS data there, so you're good. So all the issue we have with DNS, the DNS issue we describe in RFC 3833 is covered. You have none of these issues. Then you also add the censorship, resistance, privacy. Privacy here in DNS also mean that, for example, all the nodes have local copy. So, for example, if I want to query, if I want to resolve name, there is I send no transaction outside. I just use my copy of the blockchain. So name resolution is faster, and I send no transaction outside for people to trace my DNS transaction to know who I'm talking to. Okay, then it's also help with DDoS, because DDoS is one of the biggest issue we have. And if you remember, the last DDoS attack against the DNS system has been, it has a huge impact, if you remember. That was October last year. The DDoS attack was like October last year. So if you're using the Namecoins, you will not have it because it's decentralized. I have my own copy of the whole database, and I query. So because the DIN attack was against the DIN AnyCast system, so it can also help. Ethereum, which is also a different blockchain technology. Ethereum also, now they are setting up Ethereum name services, okay, to be used for Ethereum internal services, instead of referring to people with the hash address. So now you use a name in Ethereum, then the name will translate to your hash address. So this is the default of things, but it can be extended and it can be used for many others. Then Ethereum also using TLD called ETH. TLDs, I put this because I don't want people to think that these are part of the normal DNS, etc. And the good thing with Ethereum is also because Ethereum use a smart contract, etc. So it's easy to use Ethereum, for example, to build your own namespace, name registry based on the Ethereum system. Okay. very simple, very simple. So Ethereum also is trying something they call, they're offering, hosting your DNS, your normal DNS in Ethereum name system. So I register, for example, a name.TLDs, then I'll create a resource record and point to Ethereum name service. So the name resolution at some point will go through Ethereum. Then there is a gateway between normal DNS to Ethereum. So yeah, it's there. It's there. So let me maybe accelerate a little bit because I see Paulos looking at me. So then the question, I have a couple of questions. So if you are interested of using blockchain to do your DNS stuff as registry or at anyone, so the question for you is, do you create a fork on Ethereum, create a fork on Bitcoin, okay, or you run your own blockchain system, which then you need to decide how you create nodes, how you get the miners, how you implement your consensus system, okay? This is one question I'm throwing towards for discussion. The other point is threat to DNS. Threat to DNS. Do we see blockchain adding some threat to the DNS? Okay. For me, no. But we may disagree with each other because okay. So, but also question is, will blockchain naming system replace DNS? I remember a prof during the keynote was saying that, shall we remain DNS forum or naming forum? We don't know where it is going. What will happen to the current role we have in DNS? And maybe there we may see some trends, some challenges, because if we go the blockchain way, we may not need registry, we may not need registrar, we may not need, I can see Victor Caesar's face. We may not need registrar, so the role we have in the current DNS ecosystem will change probably. Yeah, will probably change. We could also decide to use, to put part of our normal DNS inside blockchain. So nobody knows where we are going, but this is an idea that I want to share with you. So thank you, Paulos.
Actually, you had more time, so if you want to continue, maybe fine.
I think I put some question there, and so we are now where we are now. So we see things going on. Nobody can predict the future. Nobody will predict the future. So that's why I think it's good that we trying to do some, some of the CC who has research department should be looking at these things, and we see, and the AfTLD at the organization also, we trying to see what is applicable for this region. I think for us it's also important to see what is applicable for us in Africa, okay, considering the challenges we have with the domain name industry. We'll see how blockchain can help us, and also prepare for if we see any threat to our ecosystem. So for example, as I said, going through the blockchain, putting DNS in blockchain, probably the roles have to change. So what can we do to help the people to convert? Because but anyway, it's clear today that you cannot sit there and doing the same thing forever. No, the game is dynamic. So how do we engage the roles we have today, registry, registrar, DNS hosting, and this, and etc. Because the other thing here is that with blockchain, we can also do some payment, attach some coins to names and do this. So the whole system, we're talking about payment, namespace, etc. So we can get everything at one place. So the whole ecosystem has to, will probably change. And so, here too, I also see that there is a need, and we have been discussing this for long. Anytime we do DNSSEC, for example, it's time for us to invest more in training people in cryptography. This thing is based on public cryptography and hashes, etc. So I think it's time to also look at how we increase capacity in crypto world, and then also this digital naming crypto also require that people be trained to know how they save. If you have electronic money, if you don't save your wallet, then the whole thing can you can lose everything, etc. So there are things in there. So it's not that the blockchain will come and solve everything, etc. You also have some challenges. So you have to back up. If you have to back up your wallet, where do you back your wallet? How do you encrypt? Because if you back up, you have to encrypt. So what if you lose the encryption key, etc., etc. So there are things in there. But at the same time, maybe we need some easy solution for people to back up, because my grandmother cannot play this game of private key, paraphrase, and encryption keys, etc., etc. So, because even for us it's difficult. Even for us it's difficult. So these are the things so there are good things in there. Okay, the futures may look different. How do we prepare? So I thank you for giving me more time.
Thank you, Alain. Yeah, a very interesting topic. Yeah. Our next presenter is Samad Hussain on IDN in Africa. He is online, but before he comes on, maybe I can invite Yaovi to introduce him.
Thank you, Chair. From the past presentation, we see that we have a lot to do. In many fields, also IDN is also a field where we have a lot to do in Africa. We did a presentation, Sarmad and the Africa team, we did a presentation in Nairobi during the Africa Internet Summit. So before giving the floor to Sarmad, who is presenting remotely, I just want to mention again that when we talk about IDN, it's not about content. It's not about content in local languages. That is very important not to make this confusion. It is about having domain name in other characters, using other characters as key. So I cannot write .cafe with accent to the .cafe. I cannot, if we have a cafe like domain name, we don't have it yet. So it is important. And in Africa, we have more than 3,000 languages. And we have some progresses from Ethiopia, for example, where the volunteers have completed the most important phases. And then we have the rules for the root zone when we want to use the script, Ethiopian script. So we have this rule defined by the group, submitted for comments, and good progress in Ethiopia. So currently, as we know that many languages in Africa, we are using the Latin script in Africa. So this is where it is important for us to be involved in this work. And in Nairobi, we had a practical session. And then what Sarmad and the team we are doing now is to help you to have some workshop at the national level so that you produce some document needed for the Latin generation panel. And Sarmad is going to talk about the implementation guidelines at the second level. When we talk for IDN globally, we talk about the top level. So Sarmad is going to give more information about the implementation guideline. So Sarmad is online. So thank you, Sarmad. You have the floor.
Thank you, Yaovi, and thank you for providing me an opportunity to present at this forum. Can you please confirm if the slides are up?
You just give us the number you want and we move the slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So basically today I was asked to talk about IDN implementation guidelines. Just to give you a very brief introduction, IDN program at ICANN is actually working at multiple projects, one of which Yaovi very recently just mentioned, which is defining rules for all the different scripts which are used across the globe to develop or validate labels for the top level. We all understand that a domain name actually is comprised of multiple levels. So when we say example.com, example is the second level label and .com is the top level label. So like rules which are required to define top level labels in different scripts, obviously there are also some constraints which should be imposed at the second level so that a domain name actually can be used effectively and securely and in a stable manner. So today what I'm going to do is introduce particular work which we are undertaking for the second level. So this applies to the label example in the domain name example.com and share some insights into that process. But before we get into the whole details of what is being proposed, I want to share a couple of examples to perhaps make you understand what the problems are which need to be addressed. So if you can move to the second slide, please. Thank you. So if you look at these three labels, these are examples of a string in Arabic script, and there are three labels given here. And I guess the question is whether these labels represent, something which is same or a different domain name in each case. And if you just visually look at it, you will probably notice that the first one is slightly different. The last character, or depending on which way you're reading it, if you're reading from right to left, the last character is different in the first one. And the second two labels are exactly the same. Next slide, please. So if you really look at the details of these labels, as far as the domain name system is concerned, all these three labels are actually different. However, if we look at a user's point of view, so somebody who reads Arabic script, actually all the three labels will mean exactly the same. So what is same or different really depends on the perspective. From a technical perspective, there can be things which are very different, and then from a user perspective, they could mean exactly the same thing. And basically, one of the things we want to do through these guidelines is that we want to make sure that this user confusability is addressed technically, so that, for example, all these three strings, which are technically different, should not go to three different registrants and really should be packaged in a single, what we call a variant set, so that any phishing which can occur due to user confusability through the visual or other similarity in the user community can be managed. Let's look at another example. Next slide, please. So there is, you see two labels here. It says Epic. I'm sure you cannot tell the difference. They are exactly the same. But if you look at the next slide please. So we're on slide number 5. And I've given the underlying Unicode sequences for both these strings. And if you see, the first string is actually coming from Latin script, and the second one is coming from Cyrillic script. And if a registry is offering both Latin and Cyrillic domain names at the second level, it would be possible for two different registrants to register these two strings, because technically they're different, and can therefore create phishing possibilities. And of course, that is something which needs to be prevented. looking further at one last example before we go into the details of IDN implementation guidelines. Slide number 6, please. So this is an example from Chinese. Obviously, the two characters here look very different from each other. Next slide, please. But even though they are different, they are perceived by the community, Chinese script community, as Chinese language community as the same labels. One is in simplified Chinese and the other one is in traditional Chinese, and are therefore equivalent and should actually be treated as same characters in the domain name system. So these are some of the potential challenges which need to be addressed through registration policies which are implemented by GTLDs and CCTLDs. Next slide, please. Slide number 8. Okay, so basically the purpose for IDN implementation guidelines is to focus on second level IDN registration policies and practices. And the aim is to minimize the risk of cyber squatting or consumer confusion, which may occur between two different domain names. It is obviously relevant for GTLDs, these guidelines which I am going to be presenting, because these are required to be followed by GTLDs through the registry agreements and by registrars through the 2013 registrar accreditation agreement. And they are also relevant for IDN CCTLDs because IDN CCTLDs agree to follow these recommendations through their application in the fast track process. So they're also in a way recommended for IDN CCTLDs. And just to overview where we are, the last version of these guidelines was published in 2011. That's some time back. So the community recently requested that these be revised because since 2011 we know now much more about how IDNs work and how they should be managed better. And therefore, based on a panel of experts, a new draft of these guidelines has recently been published for public comment. It recently closed public comment and is currently being finalized by the working group and will be published very soon after these are finalized. So what I'm going to be presenting here are the guidelines which were published in the final draft of the public comment. Next slide, please. These guidelines have been developed by members, expert community members from across the community, representing ALAC, CCNSO, GNSO, and SAC. Next slide, please. So going into the recommendations themselves, next slide, please. The recommendations are organized in 6 different topics, covering 18 different recommendations. The topics focus on transition from IDNA 2003 to IDNA 2008 protocol, format of IDN tables, consistency of IDN tables and practices, IDN variant labels, similarity and confusability of IDN tables, and terminology. So I'm going to very briefly talk about each of these recommendations in this presentation. Next slide, please. The transition from IDNA 2003 to 2008, as far as this particular topic is concerned, the new guidelines are now suggesting that all domain names which are registered must comply with IDNA 2008, which is the latest IDN standard, and registrations through IDNA 2003 protocol, which is now defunct, should no longer be possible. However, beyond the new registrations, there are always old registrations which are renewed every year, and they may actually be registrations which are compliant with IDNA 2003. And if the registry still has some of those registrations in the system, they are requested to inform the registrants of unanticipated consequences of IDNA 2003, as this particular older protocol is no longer going to be supported, or is no longer supported. Also, it is advised to the registries and registrars to publish any transitional exceptions for such pre-existing domain names which only comply with IDNA 2003 but not with IDNA 2008, and preferably give a timeline to the registrants saying that such domain names will be eventually not supported after a particular 6 months or 1 year, and define a transitional period. Also, as far as general labels are concerned, the IDNA 2003 and 8 protocols basically require that hyphens cannot be used in any label in the 3rd and 4th position, because these have been reserved for different purposes. For example, for use of IDNs, in which case the domain names must start with XN hyphen. So the hyphens are required in 3rd and 4th positions. So a normal ASCII label which you register should not allow hyphens on 3rd and 4th place, to make sure that there is no confusion between a normal ASCII label and an IDN label when it's represented in its ASCII format, the A label format. And finally, in this particular section of recommendations, it is suggested to include registration policy information and guidelines for non-conforming domain names in your website, so that registrants can become more familiar with it. Next slide, please. Talking about the format of IDN tables, basically it is suggested that these tables are contain basically the code points you are as a registry supporting for domain names, and also any variants and associated rules. And then once these are published, then any code point or character which is not listed in the registration policy, domain names should not be accepted containing such characters. These IDN tables, which are developed for each of the registries for CCTLDs and GTLDs, we encourage them to be published at INR repository, so that these can be shared with other registries who may want to implement the same languages or scripts, and we can have a consistent practice in the industry, as consistent as possible. Obviously, also there is a new format to define these IDN tables, which have these code points and variants and associated rules listed. This is called the label generation rule set format, and it's a standards track RFC 7940. So it is encouraged that the new IDN tables which are now being created should be created using this particular format. Next slide, please. So moving on, there is obviously value in having consistent IDN tables that makes the user experience better across TLDs. So for example, if you have 2 characters which are variant in one language under one TLD and not variants in another in the same language under another TLD, would confuse the user. So idea is that these IDN tables should be as consistent as possible across all TLDs. Obviously, that's not always possible, but again, differences should be minimized. For this purpose, the different TLDs, it is recommended, and registries should obviously collaborate with each other to come up with common solutions. We also, in a previous recommendation, suggested that such solutions should be posted at Aina website so that others can also share these look at these IDN tables when they're developing their own. Also, what ICANN has done is developed reference second level IDN tables or LGRs, and these have been published, and I can provide a link to these tables. These are for many different languages and scripts. And what these guidelines are suggesting is that if somebody, for example, is working on defining a IDN table for a language like Spanish or German or Bosnian, they can come and look at what is recommended from a reference table. They can reuse the reference table if they like, or they can look at the reference table to make changes based on their own particular needs and finalize the reference table and publish it. But if they change things from a reference table, it is suggested that it is done carefully so that we make sure that there is no security and stability impacts of those changes on the end users when such IDN tables are used. Also, if you think the reference tables which are published by ICANN should be modified to suit a particular need of a particular community, as I said, you can certainly do that. However, it is useful that if you do that, you also let us know so that we can update our reference tables to include those changes so that those are available to the larger community in the future as well. And then basically, it is suggested that such information should be published by the registry online. Next slide, please. IDN variant labels so variants are a mechanism to group the same labels together. I showed you some examples of what same could mean. As you could see, same could be visually similar or similar in some other aspects, like for example in Chinese, visually they're different but they mean the same thing. So different scripts have different definition of what the same is, but whatever that definition be, and the IDN tables really should be designed to make sure that same labels end up going to the same one registrant, and same labels do not go to different registrant, because that can potentially cause phishing issues, which is obviously a security problem. And this is done by defining them into a single variant set. So variant sets should be defined and then allocated to same registrant, or if not all labels are given to the same registrant, then the remaining labels from that variant set should actually be blocked, but should not be given to a different registrant. And normally, if there are more than one variants of a label, there normally are, they should be turned on, in a way delegated on the request of the registrar. They should not be automatically activated or delegated. However, if there is a registry policy which does automatic activation, then it really should be done in a very conservative way and in a way that the whole system remains very secure and stable. And it's probably not a good idea to turn 100 variant labels automatically, for example. So next slide, please. This basically slide talks about similarity and confusability of labels. Some of the similarity and confusability issues are handled by defining such cases as variants of each other. However, as the number 17 here suggests that there are some obviously cases which are not variants, and the similarity cases obviously have to go through a dispute resolution process. So some visual confusability, for example, or sameness can be handled through IDN tables, but not everything can be addressed. One thing to basically consider is script mixing. This is also something which is normally discouraged. So if you are doing domain name labels for Latin script, then I think it should be limited to Latin script. You should not mix Latin and script, Cyrillic script. So for example, pick one character from Latin and one character from Cyrillic and merge them together into a single label. So script mixing should not be allowed, except obviously in cases where it is conventionally done. So for example, in Japanese, script is normally mixed. We have the hiragana, katakana, which is mixed with Han script, which is normally used for Chinese. But it's common in Japanese community to mix these three scripts to form, for example, labels. So in those cases, it's okay. But in those cases, then it should be done very carefully to make sure that there are no confusability issues which arise from it. So that's one thing one needs to be careful about. Even if one is not allowing labels to mix scripts, it is also possible to still have some confusion across scripts, even if multiple scripts are being allowed. So even if you're not allowing mixing Latin and Cyrillic script in a single label, it is also possible that you say that we will offer Latin labels and we will offer Cyrillic labels by themselves separately. And in that case, the example of the word epic I showed you, where in one case epic was written entirely in Latin script, and in another case epic was written entirely in Cyrillic script. But even though the scripts are not allowed to be mixed, they can still create labels which are still confusable across scripts. So these cross-script confusables, are normally referred to as whole script confusables, should also be reviewed if you're offering domain names in multiple scripts through different IDN tables. Then you need to have rules in place which prevent these cross-script variants to be generated and allocated to different registrants, and this is done through a mechanism which we call defining cross-script variants rather than the in-script variants which we were talking about earlier. So those are some of the issues. One or more issue which is documented in number 15, recommendation 15 here, is that when you are expanding your repertoire, so for example, you're offering already offering domain names in ASCII, you decide you also want to add domain names for German language and then also domain names for another language in Europe or another language in Africa. So what you do is you add another IDN table for that particular language, even though you're not really going cross-script, you're still adding more tables within the Latin script. Sometimes it happens is that you had defined, so suppose there are two characters A and B, and A and B are variants. It so happens that you have A in one table and B in another table, and then therefore it's probably a good idea to define variant relationships between A and B across those tables as well, even if though A and B do not exist in a single table, just to make sure that domain names which are created from those two different IDN tables also do not clash with each other within the same script. So those are some of the confusability rules. Next slide, please. And finally, there is been a lot of terminology which is being used in IDN space. So, for example, we talk about variants, and different people understand differently what variants are. So what is being suggested is that there is some terminology which is also included in these guidelines in the appendix, and it is being suggested that the terminology be adopted more generally by everybody, so that when we're talking about variants or a particular aspect of IDNs, everybody understands what is being meant consistently across different organizations. So, those are the guidelines, the summary of guidelines. I've actually given link of these guidelines in one of the introductory slides. So I would suggest you to please go and read through them and see if there are more details which are available in that document. Next slide, please. Can we go to slide number 19? Steps. So as far as next steps is concerned, the working group is now finalizing these guidelines, and once these are finalized, they will be sent to ICANN board for approval, and as soon as then they are approved by the board in the form, the final form, they will eventually be published for implementation with GTLDs, and also, as I said, they are recommended for the CCTLD community as well. Next slide, please. That is all from my side. Slide 20 presents a link to IDN web pages, and also an email address, idnprogram@icann.org, which you can use to ask any queries you may have about this topic or any other projects which IDN program undertakes. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarmad and Yaovi. I think our last presentation is on digital object architecture, and Patrick Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm covering for Adiel Akplogan, and I have a little bit of points that I can raise about digital object architecture, and then I think we'll have a lot of time for questions. So ICANN does not have a direct role in technology development. Within its remit, we do have a role to provide education and awareness to the constituencies and communities that participate in its work of how technology evolution might impact the secure, stable, and resilient unique identifier system. At the ICANN Copenhagen meeting back in March, Adiel and the Office of the CTO team ran a session on emerging issues, and one of the topics that was presented at that session was on digital object architecture and what that might mean and impact for the community. I'll talk a little bit about what it is, how Internet of Things utilize the existing identifier system. As more and more devices become connected, IP version 6 can be a sustainable way to address the need of connecting these billions of devices. ICANN does quite a bit of education awareness raising with Internet of Things infrastructure and service actors about the existing identifier systems. So for digital object architecture, it's a framework to provide object identifiers. It's not an address name or name mapping system. It's not a competitor or replacement for the domain name system. It's an identification system for connected things. The creation of persistent identifiers is one of the features of digital object architecture. This platform does require the creation of policies, and I understand there is a DONA as an organization that is being established to oversee the policy creation for digital object architecture. I don't think that there's quite yet an open and transparent forum for developing policies on digital object architecture, and there's quite limited experience with digital object architecture deployment. We're following this to make sure that ICANN does its due diligence to determine the potential security, stability, resiliency impacts of this on the unique identifier system. While this is beyond ICANN's remit, we are following it, and we want to provide the community with the awareness of what it is, how it might relate to the dominium system, and for ways that stakeholders can be aware and involved of what and how they might reach out to the groups that are participating in digital object architecture. I don't really have much more on this, and if there are others that are more familiar with what digital object architecture is, you feel free to stand up and talk about that here. Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. So we have time for questions. Maybe what I would like to do is invite questions on the topics covered so far. But emerging issues are many. You may have your own emerging issue, and maybe we can cover that in the question time after we have covered questions for the presented topics. So the floor is open. We have 2 microphones.
Yes, good morning. My name is Kevin. I have a question regarding the blockchain and DNS. Alain, thank you very much for that that talk. That's very interesting. My question is towards how soon could this be implementable? Are there tests to try and see how DNS and the blockchain could work, and also what would it mean for how the DNS infrastructure works right now, where we have caching name servers, authoritative name servers, and then we have the root name servers? What would bringing blockchain into that mix mean for the current DNS infrastructure? Thank you.
We can ask some questions. Hi, Mark Elkins. There was mention in one of the earlier talks about SSAC. I'm just curious, what representation does Africa have on SSAC? Would be a question there. I'm sure that the Aina, you might be able to say something on that as well. And I'm curious about IDN. It would appear that it's down to the registries to submit code point tables, but I think it's only compulsory if you're running a GTLD at the moment. What incentive is there for CCTLDs to also provide the tables? So that would be a question there. And is this a job just for the registries, or what part do you expect registrars to play in this? Should registrars be somehow working out what table a person has typed some letters in and work out whether it's valid, or should this be a job only for when the stuff goes to the registries? Because I'm curious about that. And it will be interesting if one day .Africa supports Latin script, Arabic script, the Ethiopian script, whatever the name of that is, and potentially, because we have so many Chinese in Africa, Chinese script. And I'd love to see that working. Thank you.
Please, can you repeat the question for Salman, the second one?
What was my second question? Oh, yeah. Is it only going to be that the CCTLDs will have to? Yeah. In what way will CCTLDs be allowed to participate? Is it going to be a purely voluntary mechanism for putting tables in? Is it going to be made a little bit more? Because if it was somewhat more compulsory is the wrong word, but incentivized, then it's going to stop a lot of weird things happening, which is obviously what ICANN is trying to do with GTLDs. And when I say weird things, I mean words that look the same but which are quite different.
Can we take three at a time? You can wait. Maybe they can attend to the first three questions, and then we can take another three. Yeah. Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, let me start with the EXAC. EXAC means Security and Stability Advisory Committee. Security and Stability Advisory Committee, so is one of the supporting advisory committee in the ICANN system, and the role of the EXAC is to advise the ICANN board and the community on a security stability issue related to the unique identifier. I've served in that committee since the beginning, from 2001 at the creation, but I stepped down in 2015, and when I was leaving, I think there was the committee have selected someone from Mauritius to join the committee. So the committee has its own procedure of selecting people. So if you are interested, then you can write to the chairs and submit your CVs. Then they will look at your CVs and sometimes take you through interview, and then the membership subcommittee then can recommend to the EXAC that your candidacy is good. Then if you pass that level, then the EXAC will submit to the ICANN board. Then ICANN board will take a resolution to appoint you to the EXAC. So, but I haven't checked recently and see do we have more African, but.
So I can add to that. Right now, ESAC does not have any representation from Africa. So there's a real gap. There also is an opportunity. If you're interested in DNS security, there's a way to contact the membership committee and apply for membership in ESAC. I know that ESAC really wants to increase and improve its diversity, both in terms of gender and in geographic distribution. So particularly if you are a woman interested in DNS, apply to ESAC. But again, anyone from the region that is interested can contact them, and they'll follow up with you.
Kevin asked a question about blockchain and DNS, so how soon? So, okay, right now, Namecoin is in production, but it requires that you install certain software, you have some plug-in to your browser, like we do for the Tor network, for example. So they are in production, but they are not in our normal chain of business where you use your normal tool. So yeah, but as for putting your DNS stuff in blockchain, so if we take, for example, TLDs, so I think the community need to decide and then decide what we put, because anyway, in blockchain you can put the whole namespace and add the delegation as we do. So I think it's a matter of do we, for a CC community, agree to go there, and how we proceed. Do we still keep the middle people we call the registrars, okay, which can allow, we allow people to directly play. So I think it will be a matter of policy inside every thing.
Sarmad, please, can you respond to the question on IDN?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So from what I understood, the question was that GTLDs, these recommendations and therefore the IDN tables which are formed by GTLDs, they are obviously posted at the Aina repository, and whether the same should be done by CCTLDs or is expected from CCTLDs as well. So as I explained in one of my slides, basically, though these guidelines and recommendations are binding on GTLDs through their contractual arrangements and on registrars through their contractual arrangements, such contractual arrangements obviously do not exist with CCTLDs. So these are only recommendations to CCTLDs to adopt because they are generally good practice and are targeted to make IDNs more secure and usable for end users. So they are obviously highly recommended for CCTLDs, and it would be great, and it is suggested and recommended that IDN tables which are developed by CCTLDs are also submitted to IANA as an example of how a particular language or script should be covered for other TLDs, even GTLDs, to pick those up and reuse for consistency across the industry. Does that answer the question? If not, could you repeat the part which is still not unanswered? Thank you.
Maybe what I can add, and you can correct me. Currently, when we see the presentation, we don't have also a participant from Africa, for example, in the team working on this guideline. So the point is the information, most of the CCTLDs, they don't have the information. Currently, also, we have Mauritania who applied for the fast track for the Arabic script. So what Samad is saying is that at the second level, even the CCTLD using the Latin script, the implementation can be done at the second level, at the CCTLD level. So Samad, you can confirm that. Thank you.
Right. So these guidelines are at the second level. So these are, I guess, recommended for all the CCTLDs and the GTLDs to adopt for the registrations they are offering to the registrants. So that is the intention, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can take the next set of questions.
Thank you, Chair. Pierre D'Angino. Just have one or two questions. In fact, one for Alain. Thank you very much for elaborating on blockchain and DNS, and I would really like you to kind of provide more details on feasibility of this. And there was a question earlier on okay, how soon is this going to materialize? And then coming down to Africa DNS Forum, see what could be the steps here, in terms of actions, and that if, for instance, we could be better off if we had a kind of working group, I don't know, on this blockchain and DNS and see exactly how this evolve and for possible sort of adoption. The second, not question but comment I have is about IDN. And I would like to thank, Samad for his assistance. Thanks so much for what you've been doing in terms of supporting us. We had a very nice story with Ethiopia. So we managed to have this panel generation group, on the ground. Now they are fully participating. Our plan as ICANN is also to move forward and have more Africans, languages develop their own script, and be part of the whole thing. So now for us being now in Tanzania, I know Swahili is one of the languages we thought that we might be working on. Are there any guidelines, you could provide on how we really start, kind of this exercise from this place, at least on Swahili, for instance. And I know we've been discussing those things, and if eventually we could start, some contacts or have contacts or interested parties, here in this part of the world to start working on Swahili, for instance, as a script. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on digital object architecture, DOA. I've seen exchanges to the effect that DOA is a threat to the DNS. So I would really like to understand further whether this is true, and if there is a remote possibility that it's true, to what extent it's a threat to the DNS ecosystem.
Yes, I've been asked to share some additional information on DOA. The first thing is this is a little bit more nuanced, so Barack's question may be of interest. Please take a look at Internet Society website. Olaf Colcom wrote some nice summary on it. It might help. The reason why it's nuanced is that it's being developed by a inventor of the internet. That's Bob Kahn, and it's also been funded by DARPA, and it's been around for more than a decade. But it had been used principally in the library environment, and it claims to have some superiority in persistence, meaning it's for objects that last long, but it's currently being, you might say, promoted by the telecommunications community. So just from those things, it begins to look like it's a bit of a nuance, but its method of name translation is really quite similar. Its name, they call handle, has two parts, a prefix and some local portion, and its resolver is two-level. There's a global handle kind of registry that then maps onto some local something. So it's really very similar, and I've seen some of your colleagues in ICANN demonstrate to me that they can just map the same system on DNS. So its added value to some extent is unclear, but it appears to do something similar to what we do, and so it's worth us being aware and be able to explain to whoever shows up to a CC saying we should go that way, to be able to demonstrate to them that you can in fact map the same thing that they are doing onto your DNS, and therefore it's equivalent. I thought I would just share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Maybe we can take those three, Alain? Or, yeah, go ahead.
So there was a question from Pierre D'Angino. I don't know if he was speaking for himself or speaking as VP. So, yes, okay. I think you, Pierre, for raising again the point of visibility. I think I missed this in Kevin's question. So sorry. So, as I said, how soon? Okay, these are new technologies, and it's going through the normal thing. So when it show up first, we resist. Then it goes to the other phase where we start. Let me see what you are talking about. Then how it can help me. Then how it can help me. How it affect me, and then how we do, etc., etc. So it's going to the same curve of the new technology thing. So what I said is already there, okay. And the deployment we have right now has taken the approach to not impact or put anything in the existing namespace. So it's there. But how soon this will enter our existing namespace, our existing DNS. So I think, as I said, it will be difficult. But what we know is that the thing is, the technology has matured a little bit. It has some issues, scalabilities and this, etc. But now people are still working on it. So I think we can't ignore this thing anymore. So for sure. So for sure. And now the other things we are seeing is that now people are no longer looking at blockchain as Bitcoin as at the beginning. The beginning was Bitcoin, and Bob was excited, Bitcoin. Now, now people are looking at the blockchain as a technology and how it can help. So for me, this is a good thing, but as to say how it will, I don't want to risk, and I'm from Dahomey too. We can do some prediction, but I don't want to try here. Okay, I don't want to try here. But then the second question from Pierre is that yes, action. As I said, we really need to look at this. So for me, the normal thing is good. We go for a working group. If we can go for a working group, okay, have the charter. So, but don't open a working group where we talk forever. No, a real working group, not a discussion group. A working group where we have a charter, we know what we do, when we report, when we close the working group. I think if I will go for this one. But if we want to have a general discussion group too, that is fine. But we need to have a group dedicated to produce something. So I think this could be, for me, I will go for the two. General discussion list where we all discuss, but we have also a working group with a charter, people, rapporteur, co-chairs, and we have timelines to deliver things. So yeah, this is where the VP hat can be interested of helping to organize these things. So thank you. I will leave the DOA to Patrick, but I also have my own on the DOA and DNS, but I will leave it to you, Patrick.
Okay, you can type it, Patrick.
So on Barack's question, is the digital object architecture a threat to the domain name system? What I had said before is that right now it's not a competitor or replacement to the DNS. It's a system to provide object mapping or identifiers for objects. We're following it and aware of the work that's going to advance DOA. I don't know yet if at the ICANN 60 in Abu Dhabi, the office of the CTO team will have another session on emerging topics, and if they'll have another session on digital object architecture. I can certainly take that back to Adiel and suggest that there might be interest from this region and likely from other regions of hearing more about digital object architecture and what implications there might be for the DNS. So I'd say wait and see, and we'll make an announcement if there will be another session on this.
There was a question, IDN.
Okay, we thank the VP to move into more practical, because he mentioned IDN and Swahili. And if you remember the first day during the press session here, the discussion was in Swahili. So what he said is very important, we are practical. In Nairobi, for example, for those who were in the session, the workshop, we took some steps. So what needs to be done? Like in Swahili, we need volunteer. We are in Tanzania, and Swahili is a language spoken, written. So you have the email address on the presentation to join the IDN, the Latin script panel, because Swahili is a language from the Latin script. So please, in this room, we need to send back the message to the community for people from computer department at university. If you have a language center here on Swahili, to have volunteers to join the panel, the Latin panel. That is one step. The second one, we'll share with the participant a document for people who want to move practically to do the session, because what needed to be done is to identify, to do an exercise, to identify some characters, some codes that need to be considered when we are using the Latin script for IDN. So for this one, a contribution for each language community in Africa is needed. So practically, please share the message. If you're in this room, you're interested, send a mail to Sarmas, you can join the group. But apart that one, we will send also another document to guide you if you want to do the exercise. It's just an exercise that can be done in one day. So you see the characters, the one missing, the one you want to point out, and then we have a tool that can help to produce this document in the XML format, to send it back to the IDN program manager. So these are concrete things we can do about Swahili because it's a very important language. So share the message, write to Sarmari if you are volunteer to join the panel. Apart the exercise, we really will contact some people so that you can do this exercise. You don't need to be necessarily a language specialist to lead the panel. So any volunteer, we can share the document with you to have a practical session day for this contribution from the Swahili to the Latin script. This is the answer. Samar, you may want to add something?
So particularly for, I think, Swahili, I think I'm just looking at the character set which is used for it, and most of it is actually supported through the current ASCII set of characters. And if that is the case, I think obviously Swahili domain names can actually be used using the existing DNS system. But if there are actually additional characters beyond A through Z, which is already supported through ASCII, yes, as Yaovi was saying, please let us know. And we would actually want to go beyond Swahili as well and support other languages which are spoken in across Africa. And many of these languages we know for sure are written in with characters which are not which are beyond the core ASCII characters A through Z. So we do need support and volunteer time from many of you who speak these languages to come on join the Latin script panel, which is devising rules for Latin script-based languages. So as Yaovi said, you please email me if you're interested to participate and volunteer. The email address, of course, is idnprogram@icann.org. So we look forward to your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of our allocated time. I appreciate the presentations from the panel and the responses from the audience. So maybe we can give applause to the panel. Thank you. I think it's